I knew something was off the second the CFO's camera didn't turn on. 200 people on this company-wide Zoom, faces stacked like bad bingo cards, and she's just a blank square with Tracy CFO written in sterile font. I'm already halfway through my fourth coffee, stomach chewing itself to death, when she clears her throat. We need to be honest about performance and expectations. That was the first blade. I clicked mute, sat back, waited, then she dropped it. Some of the more aggressive forecasting, particularly in the enterprise finance team, created unrealistic expectations for Q4 solvency. Aggressive forecasting, unrealistic expectations. That's how she framed the only reason this damn company survived the last 2 years. I sat there staring at my screen, heart thudding. A few folks tilted their heads. You could see them squinting, trying to process. My name wasn't said, but everyone knew who ran enterprise finance. They all knew who the hell she meant. Then it happened. A sound. Sharp. Sudden. A mug hit something. Maybe wood. Maybe tile. Then silence. Could have been someone else's. Might have been mine. Doesn't matter. That was the moment I realized they weren't just cutting me out. They were rewriting the story. Making me the problem. Turning the guy who patched the boat with duct tape and crossed fingers into the reason it nearly sank. I didn't speak. Didn't flinch. No facial reaction. No blinking. I clicked to another window. My hands moved on their own. Muscle memory. I pulled up a buried directory no one else remembered existed. Something I built in 2019 when everything was still held together by spit and spreadsheets. They thought I was just some faceless number cruncher. They had no clue I was the guy who kept the power on while they played golf in Scottsdale and blew hot air at shareholders. Tracy and her little clique of execs had been selling dreams while I rewired reality to make sure payroll cleared. But sure, let's blame the forecasts. She kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I already knew how this played out. I knew Clause 9.3 inside and out. Tucked inside a credit shield agreement, barely legible. Legal probably never even read it all the way through. They'd just tossed a grenade without checking if it was live. Quick note, before we go further, share which city or country you're watching from. So, I sat there, still muted, still invisible, not angry, just done. She signed her own death certificate with that one smug line. I didn't have to wait long. Next morning, I get the ping. Temporary salary pause for performance review. No warning, no direct email, just an HR bulletin shoved into a mass announcement. 14 other people got adjustments, but mine, frozen, zeroed. After 7 years of cleaning up their disasters with spreadsheets and spit, they just iced me like a bad Netflix character. On the all-hands call that afternoon, Tracy said, "It's a routine evaluation, standard leadership practice." Then someone actually clapped. I saw them, one of the product guys. Nervous laugh, 2 golf claps, then a few others joined like morons. Half a dozen bobbleheads nodding along like she'd just delivered some kind of visionary gospel. I didn't say a word, just closed the notebook, leaned back, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Legacy Contingencies, dated September 23, 2019, buried on an external drive I kept out of rotation, my insurance policy. Inside that folder was a document called Intercomp Risk Shield, Legal Final, draft version, but fully signed. It had survived 5 CFOs, 3 legal reviews, and an acquisition no one even remembers now. Page 14, Clause 9.3, single paragraph. Badly worded, easily ignored. But I'd written it, and I knew what it did. The clause allowed the company to seize internal assets across all subsidiaries only if a credit facility failed to renew and defaulted technically. It was a shield, meant to protect the parent from cascading losses, but it had one condition. The default had to be triggered by inaction, not fraud, not mismanagement, just silence. That's where my tripwires came in. I'd set up rotating credit renewals every 90 days on about a dozen key facilities. Nothing huge, mid-size internal loans between subsidiaries, harmless looking. But I was the sole signatory on all of them, and every renewal needed a live signature to stay valid. No auto-renew, no delegation, just me. I pitched it that way for oversight integrity. Nobody argued. Hell, nobody even checked. Now they'd cut me out. Frozen salary, public blame, and they thought I'd just fade out. I opened a spreadsheet I called Latches. It tracked every single renewal, date stamped, countdown enabled. I hadn't touched it in over a year, but the clock still ticked. One facility, Corbin Freight's working capital line, was due in 72 hours, 6.5 million. My signature line was still blank. One miss, one technical default. That's all it would take to light the fuse. Once default hit, the clause kicked in, and every other dependent subsidiary became fair game for asset seizure. I'd built a system where one missed beat jammed the whole orchestra, and nobody else had the sheet music. I didn't rage, didn't vent, didn't tell anyone. I just marked the renewal as pending and closed the laptop. Then I went for a walk. It was cold outside, not freezing but crisp. Late fall in Chicago. Wind off the lake sharp enough to peel your thoughts clean. I didn't bring my phone, didn't need to. I'd already started the clock. Back home, I poured a whiskey. Cheap stuff. Glass still dusty from sitting too long. I stood at the window watching the street, drink in hand, and waited for that quiet internal shift, that gear click. The one where regret dies and resolve takes its place. They thought I was licking wounds. What I was actually doing? Setting the machine. 72 hours. One missed renewal. Then the engine I built, the one they never even looked at, would grind to a halt, loud or not. And once it started, there was no clean way to stop it. That clause wasn't a button, it was a fuse, and I'd already lit it. Tuesday morning came quiet. Cold sunlight over the blinds, laptop fan already humming before I'd even touched it. The renewal deadline hit at 9 a.m. Corbin Freight, 6.5 million line. I stared at the form, blank signature block, waiting like an open nerve. Then I just didn't sign. One click away, and I let the window close. That was it. No fireworks, no alarms, just a quiet expiration. One missing signature in a system too bloated to notice in real time. But I knew better. Somewhere in the guts of that company server, a compliance bot was running a sweep. It would flag the missing timestamp, compare against renewal schedules, and send a soft irregularity to risk management. Nothing dramatic, just a yellow triangle that said, "Attention required." Within an hour, someone in accounting forwarded it to legal. By lunch, the risk desk had a thread 10 messages deep, trying to figure out if it was a system delay or human oversight. I had the read-only feed still open, my access not yet revoked. Nobody even realized I could still see the chatter. By early afternoon, they started to smell smoke. "Who owned the renewal authorization?" one lawyer asked in the chat. Someone replied, "Finance operations. Legacy signatory, I think." Another line popped up. Was that him? I laughed under my breath. Still, they kept it quiet. Didn't want to spook the rest of the team. They labeled it routine reconciliation, but the tone shifted. I could see it in the timestamps. Shorter gaps between messages, more CCs getting added. They were circling a problem they didn't want to name. Around 4 p.m., it finally slipped. A junior analyst from compliance, fresh face, probably 6 months in, wrote, "Isn't this line cross-linked to other subsidiaries?" Silence. No one answered for 15 minutes. Then a senior counsel finally wrote, "Let's confirm before escalating." Translation: panic, but quietly. I poured another whiskey, same cheap bottle as before, sat in front of the laptop, watching them scramble through digital corridors I'd built years ago. The machine was working exactly like I designed. Slow, invisible, mechanical. Each department chasing its own tail while the gears underneath started to grind. A part of me wanted to feel something. Guilt, maybe, but I didn't. Not even anger anymore. Just that cold, clean sense of inevitability. They had no idea how deep this went. How many dependencies hung off that one expired line. Every fix they tried just tightened the knot. They'd request renewal authority, find my name locked as primary custodian, then hit an access denial because HR already flagged me as under review. Corporate irony at its finest. They froze me out of my own system and now couldn't touch it without me. By 6, the private Slack channels started lighting up. Small groups of mid-levels trying to whisper solutions. Can we clone the authorization? Can we override the signature requirement? One tech tried to spoof it, but the macro script I'd built blocked all manual injections. A red pop-up appeared. signature mismatch, external edit attempt logged. That message alone probably ruined someone's evening. I leaned back, half smiling, and scrolled through the feed while the whiskey burned down my throat. Their panic had a rhythm: denial, confusion, fear, then silence. Like watching a fault line shift under glass. They hadn't revoked my access yet because no one wanted to admit I still had it. Too many protocols, too much ego. They figured I was at home sulking, maybe updating my resume. I could practically hear the board whispering, "Let's give him space. He'll calm down." They thought I was licking wounds, but the truth? I was pulling wires, each one deliberate, each one exactly where it needed to be. And this was just the first tremor, the small shake before the collapse. I closed the internal chat window, refreshed my dashboard one last time, and watched the status light next to Corbin Freight flick from green to amber. Renewal expired, unresolved. The system had spoken, quiet, final, absolute. And somewhere downtown, I knew Tracy's phone was about to start buzzing. I didn't sleep Tuesday night. Didn't need to. By Wednesday morning, the system had already logged a full cycle on Corbin Freight's expired line. Flagged, escalated, unresolved. That was one point of failure. Now, I needed two more. At 7:42 p.m., I logged in through a secure tunnel and accessed the internal guarantee schedules for silo haulage and Bright Track logistics. Both had backdoor guarantees tied to shared credit coverage, both expiring within hours. The override keys still tied to my ID. I did nothing and just let the clock run out. No signatures, no renewals. By 9 p.m., both lapsed clean. My old system, the one they still used without understanding it, registered the third point. 3 failures across 3 subsidiaries, all within the trigger window. That's what Clause 9.3 needed, a pattern. It recognized it instantly. At 9:12 p.m., the automation script activated the liquidation sequence, not for the subsidiaries, but for the internal buffer assets connected to them. The code queued a single output. Asset reallocation process initiated, execution pending, Friday so 9 were. It didn't shout, it didn't warn, it just moved. On the back end, a notice slipped into the legal queue, triggered by a legacy compliance tag no one had updated in 4 years. And just like that, the quiet machine I built started marching toward the kill switch. Inside 20 minutes, the risk team started lighting up the thread again. I refreshed the access window. They'd finally figured out it wasn't a single point error. One message from the risk officer read, 3 linked defaults, possible clause conflict, possible, sure. At 9:50, a senior legal manager dropped the bomb. Clause 9.3, cross-subsidiary trigger, confirmed. Then another reply. Wait, that clause? I thought it was stripped after restructuring? Nope, still active. Where's the override? I closed the lid of my laptop, stood up, stretched, then opened a second machine. Old, heavy, with a scratched screen and no stickers. Logged into a private drive. There was no override. The failsafe was biometric. Left index fingerprint, encrypted keychain, tied to a physical hardware module that never left my apartment. Not out of paranoia, just habit. After all the dumb decisions I'd watched from that exec team over the years, you learn not to trust best practices. You build your own lock. By 10:30, my phone buzzed. Tracy, CFO, declined. A minute later, again, then a third time. No voicemail. No text. They didn't want a record. They wanted me to quietly fix the fuse they cut without asking what it was attached to. I left the phone face down and pulled up the server access log. They were probing every corner of the internal system. I saw failed access attempts tagged to temporary admin accounts. They were trying to create a new authorization chain to bypass the clause. I smiled. Every attempt pinged a silent audit notice. Even now, they were making it worse. At 11:04, someone reached out to my old assistant, Lauren. She hadn't worked there in over a year, left to join a competitor across the river. They pinged her on LinkedIn. She screenshotted it and sent it to me. Hey, weird one, someone from legal just asked if I had access to your original override files. I just replied, let them keep digging. By midnight, the internal transcript leaked to me through one of the finance guys still on payroll. Someone I trained, someone smart enough to keep quiet. The quote was almost poetic. "We can't stop it. He built it. We fired him, and now it's running." I played it twice in my head, not out of pride, just confirmation. That was the sound of losing control. They thought it could patch this, that some engineer in a hoodie would find the switch. But they never understood the thing they let me build. This wasn't code. This was consequence. I stayed up, didn't even bother turning the lights off. Just brewed coffee at 11 p.m. and sat at my desk, blinds open. City humming outside like it didn't know what was coming. On the second monitor, my access window blinked to life. Still active, still red only. Inside HQ, they were losing it. The executive team was locked in the war room. I could see the internal calendar invites flood in. Urgent, Clause 9.3 action review, risk containment, live dash, board special session. That last one hit just after midnight. They'd flown them in, private jet panic mode. By 12:45, the dashboard they'd once ignored now glared like a bomb timer. Auto trigger status, armed, no override. Iriksasak, scheduled execution. Friday, Ajuin. They were reading the words I'd written 5 years ago, and for once, they were actually paying attention. At 1:22 a.m., legal tried to float a Hail Mary, invalidate the clause on grounds of termination for cause. If they could claim I was fired with cause, they could nullify the underlying signature authority and cancel the sequence. I watched the internal thread hit 40 messages deep in under 5 minutes. Lawyers arguing, risk flagging escalation tiers, ops yelling for backups that didn't exist. They tried to trace the override path again, realized it was biometric, encrypted, bound to a local-only key drive no longer on company property. One intern found a legacy security report that confirmed it was non-transferable. The panic reached a boil around 2 a.m. when someone, I don't know who, asked in writing, "Should we send someone to his apartment?" Silence. Full minute, maybe more. Finally someone replied, "No volunteers." I didn't smile, didn't react. Just sat there, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the logs update in real time. They had 6 hours left before the system completed the sequence. They weren't trying to solve it anymore. They were trying to figure out how to survive it. I played music low, just enough to cut the quiet, something old and instrumental. The kind of thing you play when you need your brain to stay sharp, but your pulse low. Outside, the street stayed calm. No sirens, no spotlights. Just the regular night sounds of a city with no clue what was happening in one glass tower uptown. That's the thing about guys like me. I don't bark. I don't send warnings or slam doors. I wire the foundation. I check the lines. I build the whole system to hum in silence while everyone above me gets drunk on their own confidence. And when it finally cracks, I'm already gone. By 6 a.m., the courier had already made the drop. A plain manila folder, hand-delivered to HQ, addressed to legal. Inside, a printed copy of Clause 9.3, highlighted, annotated, signed. Top corner still bore the faded initials of the original draft committee, mine included. They didn't even know who sent it, but I did. Daniel, old finance guy, smart, loyal, and quiet. One of the last still around who remembered how this place actually stayed afloat. We'd shared late nights over takeout and terminal errors, back when things were still salvageable. He'd saved a hard copy. Guess he knew they'd need it eventually. The folder landed on the general counsel's desk just as the sun came up. She read it in front of the executive team, voice flat but tight, like her throat was starting to close. Line 18. Non-renewal of credit facility by signatory shall activate full cross-default procedure. Someone asked what that meant. Nobody answered. They already knew. At 6:17, the CEO logged into the emergency Zoom call from a cabin in Tahoe. Hair a mess, voice groggy. Probably still half drunk from whatever fundraiser or bender he'd been on the night before. He looked at the live dashboard for 5 seconds, then leaned forward. Execution pending 08:59:59. No override, no pause button, no edit access, and no plan. Risk tried to suggest freezing internal transfers. Got shot down immediately. Legal said any interference now would show intent to manipulate financial disclosures. CFO looked like she hadn't slept. Eyes bloodshot, lips chewed raw. They were cornered, completely, Every conversation circled the same final truth. There was only one way to stop it. Me. They said it like a curse. Like even saying my name too loud might trigger something worse. CFO finally muttered, "He wouldn't really let it go through, right?" Silence. Then someone asked the only question left. "Has anyone heard from him?" Not a single head moved. Even Tracy didn't speak, just kept staring at the screen, blinking like maybe the timer would freeze if she didn't look away. They had lawyers. They had auditors. They had emergency contacts and back channels. But what they didn't have, control. Because 5 years ago, when I built that clause, I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for days like this. Days when the people at the top would run out of games to play, and the system would finally call their bluff. No one moved, no one blinked. The silence stretched. They knew the timer was real, and it was almost out. At 8:55 a.m., I logged in. Same link as always. Company Zoom. One last time, I kept the camera on, plain gray shirt, hair pulled back, no makeup, no background blur, just me, like I always was. The person they never bothered to see until everything started breaking. All the big faces were there. CEO, CFO, general counsel, head of ops, 3 outside legal advisors, some board member I didn't recognize, and Tracy front and center. She looked like someone had unplugged her, eyes hollow, jaw clenched tight. I didn't say good morning, didn't ask if they'd had their coffee, just clicked share screen and brought up one thing. Clause 9.3, executions, status active, timer ticking at the bottom, 04:59. Nobody spoke at first. Then the CFO unmuted, voice shaky, like she'd been practicing lines and forgot half of them. We can fix this, right?" She was already nodding like she needed me to agree. "We'll reinstate your pay. We'll reverse the decision. Just tell us what you need." I didn't answer. Just let the silence stretch until her voice hit the floor. She looked off screen. Someone else tried to jump in. Legal this time. "We can draft an override authorization now. Emergency declaration. We can clear it with the board." I clicked my mic. 1 beat, 2. Then I said it. "You froze the one guy holding the circuit breaker." No yelling, no anger. Just facts. Tracy blinked fast. Looked like she might cry, but couldn't afford to. CEO rubbed his temples like maybe a headache was the real problem here. One of the board members leaned in like he just now realized this wasn't a bluff. Nobody else had words. Nobody moved. I hovered over the leave meeting button, looked straight into the camera. "Good luck." Then I clicked out. No dramatic hang-up. No parting speech. Just gone. I watched the timer on my end tick down from 30 seconds to 29, then 28. The dashboard lights were already shifting. Systems waking up. Alerts queuing for transmission. Letting the machine do what I built it to do. At 9 a.m., sharp, the system executed. No sound, no flash. Just lines of cold data lighting up across 3 states. Asset seizure initiated. Within seconds, internal loan guarantees evaporated. Auto default clauses pulled their weight for the first time in company history. Liquidity buffers vanished. Lenders got hit with red flags. Escrow agents triggered rapid release provisions. Subsidiaries, real ones, with trucks, equipment, payroll, buckled like folding chairs. Back at HQ, the boardroom fractured. 2 members stood up mid-call and walked out. Legal tried to reframe it as a technical misfire, but the timestamp didn't care. Everything hit exactly as coded. CFO didn't say a word, just dropped her face into her hands and stayed there. No fixing, no rolling it back. It was done. Across town, my phone buzzed once. Deposit received, $2,750,000. Clause 12.4. They'd written it themselves. Retention payout for legacy staff triggered by structural default. Valid through end of service unless terminated for cause. Which, again, I wasn't. They froze my salary, but forgot to cancel the clause that pays the one person who kept the ship afloat. Rookie mistake. I closed the app, pocketed the phone, and stepped into the lobby of my new office. Different logo, same skyline, higher floor. Receptionist smiled, waved me through. No paperwork, no onboarding. My badge worked on the first swipe. Inside, the office was cold but clean. Fresh coffee on the desk. Single-framed print hanging on the wall behind it. Clause 9.3, highlighted under glass. And right beneath it, a small metal plaque. Next time you squeeze someone, check who built the machine. Would you have pulled the plug or walked away? Drop your answer in the comments, and hit like and subscribe for more stories like this.